And with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Morgan Wagner, and I'm the Western Water Director for WLA. Welcome again to another WLA Water webinar series. Today's call, Neighboring Through Drought, Water Sharing Solutions and What They Might Mean for the West, is the third of our six-part series. Over the next few months, the series will explore the topics of soil health and water retention, irrigation infrastructure and modernization, and its impacts on producers and fish, and much more. You can find more information about these virtual events and can register for them using the link in the chat. If you weren't able to join us last month, or if you'd like to rewatch our programs, you can find a link to the February Beneath Our Feet, or Groundwater Easements, a Solution for the West webinar in the chat. Again, just a brief reminder that today's webinar is being recorded and it will be available for anyone who missed it or showed up late, and we will have a few minutes following our panel discussion for some audience Q&A. We look forward to fielding those questions. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our staff. Danny Hallett is WLA's Outreach and Membership Coordinator, and Matt Smith is our Interim Water Communications Coordinator. Now I'd like to pass it over to Matt, who will provide a brief introduction to WLA and our work. Thanks, Matt.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Matt Smith, our Interim Water Communications Coordinator here at Western Landowners Alliance. WLA is a landowner-founded and landowner-led West-wide organization. Our mission is to sustain working lands, connected landscapes, and native species. Our membership represents millions of acres of both deeded and leased public lands under management across the West. We have a broad spectrum of land interests, ownership types, and political perspectives. But our common ground is a real love of the land and a desire to keep it whole and healthy for the benefit of people and wildlife. Our work at Western Landowners Alliance is focused on empowering landowners and land managers with the knowledge, resources, and the public policies they need to be successful. We are very pragmatic and solutions-oriented in our approach because we come from the land. We are landowners and managers. We also do a great deal with communications to try to help improve public dialogue on complex land and natural resources management issues and to increase understanding of the value of private and working lands and of private stewardship. As Morgan pointed out, our membership is free and we want it to be available to anybody as a service to the landowner community. Membership comes with a number of benefits, which will keep you apprised of news and information, resources, and project opportunities. So we just encourage you all to participate and help us spread the word. We are here as a resource for all of you, and thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt. Today's webinar will feature 3 speakers followed by a brief Q&A session. If you have a question for today's panelists, and we hope you do, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. We're really excited to have about 150 registrants today for the webinar, and we'd love to know who you are, where you're located, and what your affiliations are. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. As our speakers are talking, please go ahead and queue up your questions in the Q&A, and keep an eye on the chat for helpful resources and materials that Matt will be sharing throughout today's presentations. The goal of today's panel discussion is to explore the topic of neighboring through drought, water sharing solutions, and what they might mean for the West. We recognize that landscapes, communities, and water management decisions are incredibly diverse throughout the West, and that no one program, policy, or practice can restore the water cycle or fix the pressing issues of our time. The purpose of these webinars is simply to share information and provide an opportunity for landowners and experts to exchange knowledge and hopefully find ways to build out a more robust toolbox as we think through ways to build a more resilient future for us all. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Clancy, Dylan, and Lawrence. Clancy Gendreau grew up in Western Colorado where the mountains meet the desert. He attended Colorado State University, earning a BS in Fish, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology before moving to Montana to receive an MS in Resource Conservation and a graduate certificate in Natural Resources Conflict Resolution from the University of Montana. As an applied conservation biologist, Clancy has worked in resource conservation and land management on private and public lands in Colorado, Washington, and Montana. Throughout those experiences, he has learned the significant common ground that exists at the Clancy currently works for the Blackfoot Challenge, a nonprofit watershed conservation group dedicated to preserving the natural resources and the rural way of life along the Blackfoot River in western Montana. Clancy joined the challenge as the water steward in 2022. In this position, Clancy works with a variety of landowners and partners in the Blackfoot watershed to conserve the water that sustains its life, livelihood, and landscapes. Clancy lives with his wife and daughter in the Potomac Valley, where they enjoy hiking, camping, hunting, skiing, floating, and otherwise exploring and foraging amid Montana's many rivers and mountains. Dylan O'Hare is an Alabama native and joined Palmer Land Conservancy after working for the Salazar Center for North American Conservation. As the senior conservation manager, he is responsible for helping to advance critical agricultural, water, and community building projects that are of local, state, and national importance. Dylan is a 2023 recipient of Pueblo's Emerging Leaders Award by Pueblo Latino Chamber of Commerce and received his master's in business administration from Colorado State University. Dylan is an avid outdoorsman who enjoys exploring wild places with a camera, bow, or fly rod in hand. And when he does have self-service, you can find him in the kitchen connecting his experiences from the field to his table. Lawrence Gallegos grew up in Taos, New Mexico, and spent a significant portion of his career in the San Luis Valley of southern Colorado before relocating to Santa Fe. Lawrence was the sixth generation to run his family's ranch. He studied agricultural engineering at New Mexico State University and has a background in ranching, water resource management, NRCS, and local government. He was an early member of the Quivira Coalition and has served as president of the Rio Grande Livestock Association and the El Coto and New Cienciero Acequia Associations. He has also served on the board of the Rio Grande Water Conservation District, the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable, and the San Luis Valley Advisory Committee to the Colorado State Engineer. Now, I'm excited to get our panel discussion started with a question for Dylan. Water sharing agreements, such as option agreements and short-term leases, can be utilized to meet various water supply challenges, such as decreased water from drought. The Palmer Land Conservancy emphasizes innovative market-based frameworks for water sharing. How do you bring various stakeholders, such as farmers, local communities, and municipalities, to the table to develop these frameworks? And could you provide examples of how these collaborations have led to sustainable water management solutions?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Morgan. And what I will do is pull up a couple of slides to help bring us through this question. And before I get into it, I want to kind of root us a little bit in the background of Palmer Land Conservancy and one of our main projects that I'll use as kind of a backdrop to answer questions today. Palmer Land Conservancy is a regional land trust working in the Arkansas Basin in southeastern Colorado, and we've been working in these communities for about 45 years. And our efforts with Palmer, we are here to protect land and water for the well-being of people and for nature. And I'm going to give a quick background on our cornerstone water conservation project, the Bessemer Farmland Conservation Project, to give you all just a bit of an understanding of where one of the regions that we're working in, where we're leveraging innovative tools to achieve some of these win-win outcomes that are market-based and voluntary, working with landowners. So the Bessemer project came as a result of a 2009 acquisition of water shares on the Bessemer Ditch. The local utility here in Pueblo County purchased 1/3 of the water rights from landowners in willing buyer, willing seller transactions. And you can see on the map here, this is eastern Pueblo County, with the Bessemer Ditch being the irrigation ditch on the southern portion of the map. The local utility purchased water from all the farms that you see highlighted in red. And what happened to occur is that some of the most productive farms, the highest yielding farms on this ditch, are some of the farms that sold their water. And in southeastern Colorado and throughout the Rocky Mountain West, cities are growing and they need to get water from somewhere. And oftentimes those valuable water rights come from irrigated agriculture, both being senior and high quantities of water. And with some of the most productive lands being set for dry up, the community really came together to discuss what are the options and resources that we have to avoid the real negative impacts of buy and dry, where you can look at neighboring communities like Crowley County, where water being the fabric that holds rural communities together being taken away and resulting in serious both economic and cultural and community devastation. And so with the Bessemer project, the community came together and Palmer was a part of those conversations and exploring options that we have at our disposal and options that didn't quite exist yet that could help us to achieve project outcomes. And I'll dive into some of those details and the tools that we built a little later. But what's important to know here is that our work with Palmer is rooted in our approach that's local. It's impact on the ground in local communities. It's market driven. Conservation has to work for the landowners that are willing to do it, and finances are a big driver in that. It's nonpartisan. We're nonpartisan in our approach because, Matt, as you said earlier, this work unites us and it falls on both sides of the aisle. We work in permanence as well. We believe in perpetual conservation and offering those opportunities to landowners so that lands can be stewarded and worked for generations to come. And then I think most importantly, voluntary. Our work is voluntary in our approach with landowners. And like I said before, it's also market driven. I think those go hand in hand. And so working towards solutions that work for landowners is probably the best way forward. And what we've learned in the development of these market-based solutions is that all of this work is relationship driven. The land is important, the water is important, but it's the relationships that we have with each other that helps to allow for the work to move forward. And just as an example, when Palmer brought me onto the team, I moved to Pueblo to begin this work, to have a permanent and on-the-ground presence with the community. And it's showing up month after month, year after year, and becoming a part of a community that really helps to drive this work. And that's how relationships are formed, and that's what really drives it. And so relationships move at the speed of trust, and developing that trust is something that takes time. And so I'll stop sharing there and we can move on, and I'll discuss some of the tools and strategies in a little bit.
Thanks for that. I really like the saying that it evolves at the speed of trust. I think that's really important to remember. So thank you so much. We're really glad to have you here today and for you to provide this context. It's really helpful as we consider how these programs come to be and why they're designed how they are. Now over to Clancy. The Blackfoot Challenge has coordinated a voluntary drought response plan for over 2 decades, emphasizing shared sacrifice for shared benefit. Could you elaborate on what a drought response plan is, how the plan operates, key strategies employed, and the outcomes you've observed in terms of water conservation and community engagement?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Welcome to all participants. I'm just going to bring up some slides here to share as I go along this presentation. All right, so just to root us here in, give us a little bit of context for those who don't know, the Blackfoot watershed exists on the southern southern edge of the Crown of Continent ecosystem. The Crown of Continent ecosystem, it spans Montana into Canada and the Northern Rocky Mountains. The Blackfoot watershed itself is a 1.5 million acre watershed that sits at the Continental Divide at the top of the headwaters of the Columbia River system. The river runs about 132 miles through 7 different communities, and these communities have economies supported largely by agriculture and nature-based recreation. I shared this map of the watershed not that you can read it, but just to show this kaleidoscope of colors that represents the various land management agencies and designations within the watershed. And I think this is a common environment and landscapes across the West when we're trying to manage resources like water, wildlife, weeds, things that don't really recognize these arbitrary boundaries. That's where the partnerships and the collaboration, the relationships really come together. And that's where the challenge really lies. As I'm talking about water here, I just want to kind of set the stage for the effort and the approach that we've been able to develop here in the Blackfoot over the past 30 or so decades. But really this goes back to the early 70s when some changes in fisheries management at the state level led to the state being granted in-stream flow rights on 12 rivers across the state, including the Blackfoot, to protect important fishery resources in those rivers. And similarly in the Blackfoot around that time, there were increasing pressures on the native fishery, including a mining disaster in 1975 and some really low water years. Fast forward a bit into the late 80s and early 90s, the pressures on the river really reached a fever pitch as locals were demanding more agency action on the fishery, and the Blackfoot really entered the public sphere with a movie, The River Runs Through It, which obviously was based on Norman MacLean's book. And based in the Blackfoot, although it was not filmed in the Blackfoot. This pressure really led to the formation of 2 key landowner groups in the late 80s and early 90s, one being the Big Blackfoot chapter of Drought Unlimited, and the other being the Blackfoot Challenge. The Blackfoot Challenge's mission is to conserve and protect the natural resources and rural way of life in the Blackfoot watershed. And through that, we work on a lot of different natural resource aspects, including water. But one of our, through the water program, the biggest aspect of that is our Blackfoot Drought Response Plan, which has been in place since the year 2000. And the main purpose of this plan is to minimize the adverse impacts of drought during the adverse impacts and equitable distribution of those impacts during low flow summers. And really what this is shared sacrifice for shared benefit. So understanding that drought affects us all, and no one group really can solve it, nor should bear the full burden of it. And so the drought plan asks for voluntary participation from water users to partake in actions that lead to water conservation or reduction to fisheries during these low flow periods. It offers a non-traditional enforcement of water rights that protects fisheries. So instead of the traditional enforcement of the water right that the state owns, by participating in the plan, water users can basically be shielded from call on their water rights if they meaningfully contribute water conservation during these drought periods. And an important piece is that it aims to involve all Blackfoot water users. So not just the consumptive water users or irrigators, but also those recreators, businesses, agencies that also use this water. So I know I'm running short on time, but here's a list of some of the types of actions that might be included in a drought plan. And in terms of results, I just wanted to mention that we have over 90 participants in this plan, and it's important to note that the water conservation that happens through this and the habitat protection that happens through this is greater than what would be achieved through traditional adversarial enforcement of these in-stream flow rights. So I will pause there for now, and we'll get into more details of the plan in upcoming questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You work for such an important group that can remind us all how innovative collaboration is critical in getting projects off the ground. I'm curious to know how water sharing is being discussed more broadly in a cultural sense and what systems are out there to support this work. So Lawrence, unlike many agricultural systems in the West, acequias and traditional grazing cooperatives have long-standing traditions of communal land and water management, emphasizing equitable distribution and shared stewardship. Can you briefly describe the role of acequias in traditional grazing systems in northern New Mexico and how these practices have adapted to contemporary challenges posed by drought and climate change? And are there specific examples where these communal management strategies have effectively mitigated water scarcity or improved rangeland resiliency?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Lawrence Gallegos, and I do have some slides right here. I think that Danny was going to help me put them up, but anyway, I uh, was part of two different acequia associations in the San Luis Valley when all the time I was ranching. I ranched there for about 30 years, and this picture of the acequia is a picture of the El Codo acequia, and it's the number one priority on the San Antonio River. And uh, I was a president there from basically from 1994 till May of not 2018. So I was there for a long time, but I have a little bit of history here that will explain a little bit of the difference between acequias and other ditches. That the acequia system actually came through the first Spanish settlers that moved north from Mexico, and the first settlers were settled in a little community just north of Santa Fe, and the first settlement was in 1798. So it's practices that have been in our area for going on over 400 years now, and the thing that really sets the acequia system apart is that the governance and how they do share the water, and that and both in Colorado and New Mexico, they've basically set it up where the governance is in state law. And one of the main things I think that would be different in Colorado is that they when it's a one person, one vote, more like what we have. if we're voting for in a state or federal election, unlike where most ditch companies and stuff will vote the by the amount of water they actually use or amount of land that they have. And so it makes it so the water is shared equally. And when when uh, when I was president, and we would also make exceptions, especially we had some really drought years. We would actually let several of the like, for example, if somebody had put in a new crop that year, there's a lot of alfalfa growing there, and there's a couple of years that it was so dry that we would let the people or the parciantes, the members of the sequia that would that have, we didn't want them to lose their crop, and so we would let them irrigate a little bit sooner to try to prevent them from losing their crops and stuff. So that if you look at this slide, it just tells a little bit about the history of the acequias, and then we have a lot of the Native American, their Pueblo influence that they had is because they were already drawing water out of the rivers when before the Spanish came to that, the Spanish settlers came in, and so that they took some of the stuff that the Spaniards were bringing, and I think they actually took some. The Spaniards took some of their traditions too. So anyway, there's a big cultural significance on what they're, how they were doing it, and I think that's what has kept them alive over the centuries. And anyway, you want to move to the next slide, Danny? And anyway, I just want to show this slide right here is because it's an example of how we were able to work together with the different sequias actually on the San Antonio River. This is a diversion structure which they would have to just actually take in equipment or bring in rocks and stuff to make the diversion there. And we were able to work with actually two different acequias and to get diversion structures like this on the which the community and most of the wouldn't be able to afford to do that, and that this structure was a $1.2 million project that we did with the help of the Colorado Water Conservation Board and also with NRCS, and there's about 60 members on this acequia, and it was costing $2,000 or $3,000 every year just to make sure we can get water into the acequia, and so now they have this permanent structure that's that they would they probably would have spent $1 million eventually, but anyway, we were able to go ahead and by making improvements on the infrastructure and everything, it makes it easier to, especially on low water years, to make sure we can divert what the water rights. And I'll stop there and explain a little bit more about the communal grazing a little bit as we move forward.
Thanks, Lawrence. We too often hear about short-sighted solutions that don't benefit entire communities in times of drought and climate change. So Dylan, I'm wondering, what role can water sharing agreements play in placing these practical ways to manage water for the long term while considering economic viability for landowners and managers? And are these concepts inherently at odds with each other?
Yeah, these competing demands don't have to be necessarily at odds with each other. In a landscape like the Bessemer Ditch, where water has already been purchased, and dry up is going to occur in the future, there is an opportunity that we are working towards to optimize where the water is used long into the future. And as we all know, water is a statewide, it's a regional, it's a national issue. And with the Bessemer project and the other things that Palmer is working on, we believe that the impact also happens at the hyper local level. We are working within the goals of a statewide plan here in Colorado, but we're working on a specific irrigation ditch with specific communities and individual landowners. And so the goal is to take this framework of the Bessemer and that we've developed with the Bessemer and apply it at that unique and local level. And the framework is really rooted in our toolkit. You can see on this slide that there are a number of ways that we approach building a toolkit that is direct or uniquely applicable to a specific landscape. And to continue to use the Bessemer as an example in terms of trying to optimize where water is going to be used, we have traditional real estate like transactions at our disposal, fee title acquisitions, conservation easements. We have subject matter expertise, and the way that we've leveraged that is by building data-driven tools to help move the needle forward. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But funding and leverage, we know that funding helps to make all of this happen. But we're really looking at the advocacy and influence. That's taking this work and addressing the project from a policy perspective. And that ties into the data that we have developed as well. But really, if there is one unique tool that we have developed for the Bessemer project, it does fall into the legal and policy level. We developed a substitution of dry up provision. So when the local utility purchased the water, they had to go to water court during a change case. And in their decree, we worked with that utility to develop and add a clause into it. It's called the substitution of dry up provision. And what it allows us to do is to substitute the dry up covenant that exists on some of the most productive farms and substitute it or move that dry up covenant to less productive farms. So that when dry up does occur, the economic impact is lessened because the highest producing farms are kept in irrigation. Now, I say all of that. This isn't Palmer telling landowners which farms are going to be dried up. If you remember, we talked about how our work is voluntary and there is a market-driven value proposition that exists because the remaining farmers that didn't sell their water have an opportunity with this tool in partnership with Palmer to really optimize where their owned water is used in the future. If they can take their water rights and put that onto a farm that's more productive than the one that they currently are operating on, then that's a win for them. And so to just dive in a little bit deeper and look at what the real opportunity is with the Bessemer project, this is a graph from our economic impact analysis, and that EIA was shared in the chat, and I think it'll probably be sent via email. And the reason that we developed the economic impact analysis is so that we can provide strategic direction to the project from a data-driven perspective, and also inform and support decision-making at the high policy levels here in Pueblo County. But what's really interesting is that, you know, on this graph, you can see we looked at current production, we looked at foreseeable future production, and we know which farms are going to be dried up in the future. And so we know what the impact of dry up is going to be. And so those are the 3 bars on the left. The 2 on the right are looking forward. So this isn't just an economic impact analysis that's looking backwards at what has been, but it's a scenario-based economic impact analysis that charts a path forward. And by using the substitution of dry up provision on 1,000 acres and then 1,500 acres, you can see that there's an opportunity to leverage investment into the farming community with these substitutions or with an optimization of where water gets used that can lead to an almost equal or greater economic output from the farming community, with 1/3 of the farms being taken out of irrigation. And so what we see there is that it is possible in this case to leverage investment and new legal tools that allows for a municipality to take 1/3 of the water off of a ditch that it bought in, you know, willing transactions, but also keep this community whole from an economic perspective, which is what landowners really need to drive their operations for generations to come. So that's an example of one of the tools that we developed and how it's being leveraged to advance the project.
Thanks, Dylan. That's a nice segue into this question for Clancy. It's when we continue to explore irrigation efficiency practices and how they can impact water users. Your organization offers programs to improve irrigation efficiency and soil moisture management. Can you briefly speak on those programs and elaborate on how they have impacted water users and agricultural productivity in the Blackfoot watershed, especially during drought periods?
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, the Blackfoot Challenge has various irrigation programs for the past 15 years. And the purpose here is to give information to irrigators to help apply the right amount of water at the right time while addressing concerns of drought, stream flows, and other issues. Some examples of our programs include during the winter months, we supply monthly water supply reports. So this is a localized gathering of data and information that helps to give the picture of what water supply might look like in the summer months. And we give those to irrigators monthly frequency during the winter. Obviously, here in the Blackfoot, most of our water supply comes from snowfall and snowpack in the mountains. So we look at that at the watershed scale in great detail. In addition to that, during the irrigation season, we supply weekly irrigation scheduling reports to irrigators. And these are fine-tuned to the Blackfoot watershed, looking at specific crop water use predictions for the coming week, so that irrigators can get an idea of how much irrigation water they will need to supply to meet crop water demands. And we have that now for 15 years, and so we can kind of get an idea of how crop water use is changing in our landscape here in the Blackfoot. In addition, we work with irrigators and willing landowners on irrigation efficiency. So looking at what systems folks have, how can we make improvements in terms of water delivery efficiency as well as energy efficiency, which is, can be a huge cost to delivering water in areas that you would like. And we also have provide soil moisture monitoring equipment, again, providing information that helps irrigators make decisions on a day-to-day basis. When it comes to drought, all of this is really ultimately trying to give irrigators effective information to manage during drought. And what we really have developed over the past 15 years for the Blackfoot in terms of irrigating during drought is a strategy of irrigating early, irrigating deeply, and irrigating effectively. And the information we provide is really meant to help irrigators meet this kind of tip. And to do this, you really need to know your system, you need to know your crops, your soil, and evaporative demand. And so the programs are tailored at knowing this type of information. Where can you make efficiencies? What kind of soil do you have? How can you improve the health of your soil to increase water holding capacity or infiltration rates? What does the crop water demand look like daily, hourly, seasonally? All of those can help really improve efficiency in terms of irrigation and get through drought periods. And then, some other examples of tips that we offer during drought times include rotating systems, reducing acreage, and really focusing irrigation where you can make the most production, potentially switching crops, but also just being watching and preparing for the upcoming year, taking advantage of changing spring conditions, and again, looking at snow melt and runoff and that complex mix of how that affects soil moisture going into the growing season. So I think I'll leave it there and look forward to further discussion.
Thank you so much. Lawrence, regarding grazing communities and water management, the Western Grazing Network and the National Grazing Lands Coalition engage in policy advocacy and outreach to support landowners and grazing communities in sustainable land and water management. How do these policies affect efforts contribute to the resilience of grazing communities in the face of water shortages and drought? Can you discuss any recent policy successes or challenges related to protecting water resources for rangeland and livestock producers? Oh, it looks like you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Danny, can you go to slide number 5 that I have there? And anyway, yeah, at the National Grazing Lands Coalition, we've have been doing a lot of work to try and improve grazing throughout the western part of the United States. We have the actually the we found out, especially in a lot of the old land grant communities that have uh, uh, so some of them, the lands have been lost in a lot of ways and stuff, but we know that some of our forests aren't in the healthiest situation because of and I think a lot of the reason that there's been so many changes is that in the landscape in some of the areas where we had some really bad fires in northern New Mexico in 2022 where you lost hundreds of thousands of acres. That year they lost to wildfires over 600,000 acres, and there's a lot of really overgrown forests and stuff. The picture that you see here is actually that's Vermejo Park Ranch, which was an old Mexican land grant that was that now that the Turner organization owns. But anyway, what we've done and while there was legislation with these climate smart grants that actually were awarded originally to Western Landowners Alliance, but however, but because of they the National Grazing Lands Coalition took over these grants and decided to help out and especially with some of these ranchers that are doing some communal grazing on old land grants. There's just over the hill from Vermejo Park on the uh, western slope of the Sangre de Cristos there. There's the one organization we're working with. It's the Rio Costilla Cooperative Livestock Association. It's RCCLA, and they have 70,000 acres there where we're helping them to improve their grazing by well, the first thing we're doing is having to do water structures for in places where they can graze. They've got about 8,000 acres in close to the little community of Costilla, and we were encouraging them and getting them to do some rotational grazing, high intensity and with long rest periods, and so we've had several ranchers up there that have done really good work up there and increased their production dramatically. We have one rancher up in Angel Fire area that on 300 acres that went from almost 60% bare ground to no bare ground just by the rotational grazing. But we need to put the infrastructure, the water infrastructure on these grazing systems that's the first step, because yeah, you have to have water for the cattle or whatever. Some of them have done it with sheep and goats also. But anyway, that's just some examples of what we're doing. We're also putting we have the Valle Vidal which is part of this same land grant that that Vermejo Park was part of, that we're working with that allotment to train to and we're going to use virtual fencing and stuff to help with uh, the rotational grazing systems. And so we're along with three other Forest Service allotments that are on the Carson National Forest, and which is where also in the burnt area where the Calf Canyon Hermit's Peak fire devastated that area. And so yeah, it's just the thing about it is it takes resources, and we need to through the Farm Bill and everything we need to get those resources available, especially in these communities that are, they don't have a whole lot of resources to do that by themselves. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. Thanks for highlighting the need for assistance in these more rural communities. Dylan, I'm wondering how certain plans can be leveraged as a tool to create positive outcomes for working lands. Looking ahead, what are the Conservancy's plans for expanding or enhancing water sharing solutions to address ongoing and future drought challenges in the West? And how can it be replicated in a way that can have positive impacts in terms of resiliency for working lands?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've used the Bessemer Farmland Conservation Project as the backdrop for the discussion today, and showing how efforts to build a toolkit is really the backbone of our water conservation work. And the Bessemer project is been a longstanding project. We've been at it for nearly 10 years, and it's about bringing unique deliverables and results to the local community in Eastern Pueblo County. And so the goal here is to replicate that approach, as you kind of touched on, and to bring the approach, the idea of building a unique toolkit to other communities. And we've already started to do that. And there's not going to be another Bessemer project as a carbon copy that we're going to work on in the future, but lessons learned and strategies that we've used and leveraged can be brought and adapted to other landscapes. And so we are working lower down in the downstream in the lower Arkansas Valley on a conservation project. That's a ditch-wide conservation project that we were brought into because of our work on the Bessemer. We've partnered with other land trusts on the western slope to help leverage resources and share lessons learned to help them address their unique needs. And so it's about creating this water optimization blueprint. And when we think about it, we really think about it from two perspectives with the water conservation work. There's, for lack of a better term, a defensive approach and an offensive approach. The defensive approach meaning there are irrigation districts or irrigation ditches that have already been impacted by municipal acquisitions of water rights. And so we have to, like the Bessemer project, where we have to learn how to work with, to share, to optimize the limited water resources that have all of this demand. But then there's the offensive approach, where there are so many irrigation ditches that have not gone through the same issues with local municipalities or municipalities throughout the state looking to acquire their water rights. And so how can we offer opportunities for conservation to those landowners as well? It's about giving landowners options regardless of what the circumstance they individually or they as as a ditch company are facing. And so we're here to work in unique landscapes to bring our market-based, community-driven approach and toolkit to these communities to give landowners options so that we can optimize water use for long-term production.
Thanks, Dylan. That's a great reminder of just how delicate the balance between water conservation, drought, and productivity and profitability and collaboration is. Clancy, Blackfoot Challenge brings together landowners, agencies, and other stakeholders to address water scarcity. Can you discuss the benefits and challenges of this collaborative approach and share examples of how it has enhanced drought resiliency in your community?
Yes, I can. Just bringing up my slides here again quickly. Yes, I think at first just want to point out that the approach that we've developed here in the Blackfoot, I see really involving these kind of three key guiding principles. Of course, everything we do is relationship based, is partnership, and here are just some of the partnerships that are involved in our projects. We've already talked about the shared sacrifice for shared benefit, just recognizing that drought impacts us all. But we also have an approach of finding win-win solutions in water, which I think, as we're hearing in today's webinar, examples of that. I think often we think of water in terms of zero-sum game. If there's a winner, there's a loser, but there really are opportunities for win-win solutions out there, and being creative to find those is something that we try and do here at the Blackfoot. Getting into our program, I see our overall approach and the tools that we use kind of in these different buckets. So we touched on the Blackfoot Drought Response Plan and some irrigation and scheduling programs, but then these win-win solutions for fish and agriculture and drought resiliency practices are also tools that we use here. And just to quickly give a couple examples, when it comes to win-win solutions for fish and agriculture, partners have been working in this area for close to 4 decades now, and these ongoing efforts have led to the completion of hundreds of projects with more than 150 landowners to enhance in-stream habitat, increase in-stream flows in tributary systems, address fish passage barriers, or to reduce entrainment of fish in irrigation ditches across more than 40 tributary streams in the Blackfoot. And in each of these cases, while they're all different, the goal is always to both improve the water conservation and habitat conditions for fish while improving maintenance operations and sustainability of agricultural operations. And so that's just a key foundational piece to all of this. In terms of drought resiliency, it's kind of, the future of where we're headed, looking at opportunities for natural water storage, increasing soil health, as I mentioned before, how to really fine tune irrigation water management to both have resilient crop systems and enough water in the streams for fisheries. And then, looking at the data and models that we can bring to help answer some of those questions. But finally, to get to kind of your question about community resilience, I see this approach as really affecting community resilience in two ways. So there's the physical kind of ecological resilience that we're trying to get at. So looking at your streams, soils, crops, forests, how to keep those systems resilient as we're seeing drier and drier years. And the restoration and the work around that really gets at that point. But equal in terms of importance is the social resilience. And when you talk about a system and a community resilience to these changes, those social ties are really going to be important to buffer and create the capacity for the community to adapt. So it's those relationships, it's the trust, it's the communication and flexibility that's built into something like a drought response plan or a collaborative approach to water management that is going to be key to building community resilience at the watershed scale. And I think I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, thank you for that. We're running a little low on time today, and so for those questions that we haven't gotten to in the Q&A, we will follow up via email. I'd like to give just the last 2 minutes to Lawrence this afternoon to speak to how this to hopefully end on a positive note and discuss how long-held water sharing practices have proven successful throughout countless generations, and how these traditional grazing practices and land stewardship in the West are deeply rooted in cultural heritage, much like the acequia system. How does preserving and honoring these cultural traditions contribute to the resiliency of ranching and grazing communities facing water scarcity? And I'll give you the last couple minutes to close us out, Lawrence. You're muted.
Thank you, Morgan. I think the traditional side of it is very important. I know in the acequias that I was on, that not it wasn't only just the farming and ranching, but just everybody in there in southern Colorado where I was ranching, every acequia and every little community had their church, so that there was a religious aspect to it also, and then it was always they're trying to work to be part of the community, and one thing that they've done and that came in is because nothing was really ever written down until probably around the turn of the 20th century, when they started deciding that there's some people who are going to sell their property and go so forth, and so they decided to start putting bylaws together, and even especially in the 1990s and or so, several of the sequias got together, and they were changing their bylaws so that if people were going to sell out, we didn't want them to sell their water rights uh, outside, or get them moved from to a different place. So they a lot of the sequias went ahead and put into their bylaws that they had the right of first refusal. So that they would maybe prevent you know for there be to be a lot of development in that area, or just keep the water in the acequia, that instead of losing that water that was going through there. uh and and then I think the big thing that's really I think so many of uh the ranchers, especially that in that area, I've seen that they had to change some of their practices so that they can you know get the more infiltration of the water that does come through precipitation, and then instead of letting it run off, because uh but there's been areas where there's so much uh overgrazing and stuff, that example of the one I mentioned earlier before there in Angel Fire, where that was 60% bare ground and it was just running off, and by changing the practices and the grazing systems, that they can see that it actually helps them get more water into the system. And sometimes it feels like, I know they brought in both Pat Pacheco and on Alejandro Carrillo, and they've showed how sometimes if you make some of these changes, you get more precipitation too. So anyway, that's kind of what I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, and a big thank you to our speakers, and thanks to all of you for attending our webinar today. We hope you'll join us next month for our next webinar, where we'll explore water and irrigation infrastructure and what it might mean for producers and fish in the West. As a reminder, we'll send out the recording and recap next week. Finally, we'd like to thank the Walton Family Foundation and our partners for supporting our water program, and for all our community members for supporting WLA and our mission. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.